It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So folks, I have a true story for you today. Yes, it's a true story, and it's an interesting story. And it's a story that maybe, how could it affect your life or anyone that you know, their lives? Well, you're going to be interesting to know that my guest today was involved with something that really was pretty tough in her life. The book is called Call to Witness. And let me just read, the best way I can read it to you is to give you an idea about the true story. Call to Witness is the true story of one woman's battle with disability. So if you have a disability, you'd be interested. Discrimination. And a leading pharmaceutical powerhouse. Jane Gagliardo was a throwaway employee, fired after working nearly a decade for a leading vaccine maker when her disability surfaced. Jane is fearless and impassionate, and her story will leave readers empowered to stand up for themselves, even if it means standing alone. Jane, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Interesting story?
I think so.
Interesting story.
Thank you.
This book, Call to Witness, folks, just so you know, has been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. So it tells you how interesting this book is. And there's some great, it's a great story, but some strong lessons that we can learn from that. You know, every once in a while in our lives, we need, you know, when someone goes through some kind of illness, they have these groups where they get together and talk. So yes, it's a way where you can vent and let people know and have compassion. Because sometimes when you're sick, all you need is someone to talk to you. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
But let's go back in Jane Gagliardo's life, okay? You're Italian, and you were born and raised in Ohio?
Yes.
Okay. So now, let's talk about your childhood, because at the age of 17, you became pregnant. But let's talk about what happened in your childhood.
Well, I grew up in a very abusive home. My father was very abusive to my mother and my oldest brother. And you know, through these battles of every day just trying to survive this horrific abuse, I would always stay.
Did he abuse you?
No, he never abused me. He abused my mother and my oldest brother. They were always the targets. But
was your father an alcoholic?
No.
He was just abusive?
Yes, he was just abusive.
Okay.
And, you know, not to defend or even condone what he did, he would tell me in later years that he was very abused as well by his mother, physically abused. So, you know, the pattern of that and the cycle of that is, it usually is done to you prior, and then you usually become the abuser yourself. But I just would always stay out there with my mother. I'd hit him over the head with a broom. I'd hit him with a frying pan. I'd call the police. I would, you know, particularly when he would hold, you know, the rifles to her head and that kind of thing, I would, you know, try to grab the rifle from him. And my older brother would take the younger two and hide them under the bed, hide them in the closet, so that he couldn't have access to them.
What do you think prompted him to be abusive? Was it his work? Was it bills? I mean, what is it that would cause a father to do that?
I don't know in his case. He always blamed my mother for either something she cooked incorrectly, the way she looked at him, you know, that the house wasn't clean the way he felt it should be if he found dust under the table. There were all kinds of reasons that he was able to sanction in his head as to why he had to.
Did he realize, I mean, you know, did he realize what he was doing? I mean, what kind of work did he do? That's
interesting, because he was a pipe fitter welder. He was a veteran. He was in the Navy, is where he learned his trade. But he, you know, it wasn't until right before he passed away that he actually took some accountability for the things that he did. You know, in other words, when I say accountability, he admitted that he did them. Up until that time, he really didn't feel he did anything wrong or that it was sociably acceptable. He wasn't a drinker, and when we would call the police, we lived in a project. They would come, they would take him outside, they'd give him a shot of whiskey and a cigarette, and you know, they'd say, you're going to do it again.
What year was this?
This was, oh my gosh, so what was I?
40s?
8 years old. I was born in 53. So I was young. I was 7, 8, 9. And twice an ambulance was called. She was unconscious. At one point she was 7 months pregnant with my younger brother. She ended up in intensive care because he beat her so badly. But he always apologized,
Yeah,
Sam,
but that doesn't mean anything.
and
Okay.
she always took him back.
Yeah. Well, that's the Italians.
Yes.
Okay. Was he a churchgoer?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, we were in church all the time. We honored the holy days. We said the rosary once a week as a family.
And yet,
yes.
even with that, he just was. I mean, was there anything psychologically wrong with the person, or?
I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
But I mean, back in those days, like I said, I think it was sociably acceptable that you slapped your wife or did that kind of stuff. Yeah. And
so,
he was never arrested. His family was a pretty prominent family in Warren, Ohio. And
yeah. How old was your father at the time when he was doing this?
Oh my gosh.
In his 30s or 40s?
Yeah, I would say.
And how old was he when he passed?
He passed when he was. I think he was 71 when he passed
And your
away.
Mother, how old was she?
She was 69.
Okay.
And interesting, they were married 48 years when he finally left her and had girlfriends. He always had girlfriends. I can remember my mother taking us, we had a big station wagon. You must remember those huge station wagons.
My father had one.
Yeah, everybody had one. And she'd put pillows and blankets for my brothers in the back, and I would sit in the front, and we would go to the bar wherever he was with the girl. And one point, she had her girlfriend with us, and my dad and this lady came out, and they were making out, and my mom got out of the car and proceeded to, beat the girl up. And my mom's friend put her hand in front of my eyes, and she said, "You don't want to be a witness to murder." But she always took him back, and she always took him back because my grandma would say, "You're Catholic, and you'll go to limbo if you divorce, and you won't be able to receive the sacrament." So my mother stayed.
Well, it just growing up in a family like that, okay, especially in families today, even when parents are arguing, and sometimes kids, the trauma you must have seen, okay. So now, how did that affect you? Okay, because at 17 years old, you got pregnant. Was your boyfriend, or was how did?
He was we were actually planning on getting engaged, and my husband John came from a very similar background, and we would talk about our family's background in regard to abuse, and we didn't want to have that for our children. So my father, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be an OR nurse. I wanted to go into the Army, and he refused. He said, "No, women are only good to have babies. That's what you're good for." Excuse me. So I ended up getting pregnant and marrying right before. For instance, we were married in April of 71. We graduated high school in June. So we were married in high school, and that was so taboo back then. You just didn't do that. And my husband was a wonderful man. We changed the cycle. He never hit me. He never abused me. We raised 3 wonderful sons. So, we did change that.
So you had that trauma in your life, okay? So you get married, start having children, okay? Now you're going into workplace, okay?
Yes.
All right. So this is where we talk about when we're getting in with the fact that you have this disability and discrimination and a pharmaceutical powerhouse. So it's an interesting story. So let's talk about then how did you, the job you took, and then what happened?
So I was hired with this large pharmaceutical company in 1987. I was diagnosed in the early 1980s with multiple sclerosis. However, I never told them that I had MS, only because it didn't affect me. I would go in and out of exacerbations and come out of them, without having to use a cane or a wheelchair or anything.
Where you get medication for that?
No, I never did the traditional med. I always, I did everything holistic and still do till this day. The choice is yours with any kind of illness.
Looking at you, you look like a specimen of health. I mean, you look
well,
fat.
thank you.
Yeah.
I take a lot of vitamins. I
Yeah.
do acupuncture, reflexology, chiropractic care, and that's what I do.
So you're in the workforce. Okay, so now you have this disability. Okay.
Yes.
So what happens then?
So I worked for them faithfully. I started a telemarketing company for them, which is now a multi-million-dollar part of their business. And I had gotten a new boss in February of '96. She was very uncomfortable with the fact that I had a disability, and I was
Why
fired.
did it affect your work?
It didn't affect the work that I was doing. However, she started putting extra work on me. And under stress,
Did she know that you had muscular sclerosis?
multiple sclerosis, yes, she did.
So you did notify your employer that you had?
Yes, they actually asked me for a note from my doctor saying that I was under his care.
Okay.
And he provided that.
So
to
the
them.
company at the time was okay until the boss comes into the
That's
picture.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
So she comes in, okay, and in this book you talk about that.
Yes.
Okay. So what happens now with this girl coming on? Was she your age or older than you?
She was my age.
Okay.
My age. And I'd known her previously. Our sons were friends.
Okay.
But she just didn't like the fact that I had a disability. And she made that very well known in staff meetings, emails. But she started putting extra work on me. I asked to have some extra projects done to make extra money. And she started really piling the work on. So then I went to her.
Were you getting paid for that?
Yes, yes. And then I went to her and I said, look, I know I could do my regular job. I just need to have some of these, the military orders is what I was doing. And if you could take some of that away. So they agreed, and then they fired me. And under...
Okay, so they agreed that to take the work on, and then when you took the work on, who fired you?
The woman did. Yes.
Why'd she fire you?
She fired me for performance.
Okay, so she set you up.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, she set you up.
Yes.
Folks, I'm talking to Jane Gagliardo. Interesting story about this called to Witness. It was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and it's a story that, you know, it says here, one woman's battle with disability, discrimination in a pharmaceutical powerhouse. Interesting story. What do we learn from this? We come back, we'll see what actually happened then when she was fired. Back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Remember, 24/7, ssptv.com. Watch all of our locally produced programs. And folks, if you didn't download our app, do it. Search SSP TV, download the app. You'll see everything on there. We even live stream. For example, a show like today, you'd be able to watch it on the app. Particularly the interesting story that is being told today by Jane Gagliardo, who was fired because of a disability, and the book is called Call to Witness, and it is nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. It was written by Sherry Blackman, I'm sorry. All right, so now they pour all this work onto you, Jane, and were you able to do the work?
I was able to do the work until she started putting more work on me.
Okay, so you saw the method. Okay, so she fires you.
Yes.
What happens next? And so the name of that person's in this book. Person who was fired.
She fired me and made quite a spectacle of my being escorted off the campus, and you know,
She didn't like you.
Obviously not.
I
no.
mean, she wasn't happy enough that she fired you with a disability.
Yes.
Then she wanted to make a spectacle of that. Okay.
Yes.
Shame on her. Shame
Yes.
on her.
But you know what? I think she just really had an uncomfortable feeling that I was going to cost the company money because of my disability. And so I called my attorney because they actually, the day that they terminated me, they handed me a check for $10,000 and wanted me to sign a resignation letter. And I said, I won't do that. I'm not resigning. I want to work. I want to work here. And they said, well, if you just sign the letter and take the check, it's just going to make everyone's life so much easier. And I said, no, I won't do that. But I will take a copy of everything you want me to sign. So they did that reluctantly. They were very annoyed because it was 18 pages long. And I brought it, I went across the street. At that time, there were no cell phones. So I went across the street to the Acorn Exxon, picked up the phone, and called my lawyer. And I said, hey, they fired me. And he said, "You didn't sign anything, did you?" And I said, "No."
Smart lawyer.
Yes, very smart lawyer. And he said, "Come in tomorrow at 10 o'clock." And I said, "Well, they said I can't collect unemployment." And he said, "Oh, yeah, come here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and we'll go over it." So I rolled everything out to him, what happened. He waited about 2 weeks because the American with Disabilities Act had just become law in 1990. And I was fired in 1996, so it was fairly new law to everyone. And he decided to take the case on. And from that point, it took us about 6 years to get them into federal court with a jury trial. And it took them about almost a week, and they found in my favor that, in fact, I was fired because of my disability.
So the journey in those 6 years,
Yes.
okay, what did you do?
Well, you have to go through a process. There's a protocol. You have to go to the EEOC. You have to go to the another employment facility in Philadelphia, just to have their stamp of approval to say, "Oh yes, you need to go further." And that process is long because it's government. There's paperwork. There's all kinds of forms to fill out, and then you go before, with the EEOC, you go before a panel. And we had a representative there, and after it was all said and done, she wrote a letter for us to move forward with the case, and on the bottom of the sheet she put, "Go get him, counselor."
Now, with your disability, which you still have.
Yes.
Okay. Certainly, stress doesn't help matters at all.
Not at all, no.
Okay. So how did this stress, and no matter what you have, no
Yes.
matter what illness you have,
That's
stress
correct.
seems to be something that aggravates and more so. So here you are, you're a mother, you have children. They fire you because whatever reasons, a disability reason. Well, how did this stress affect your personal life in those 6 years when you were going through this?
Well, Sam, they blackballed me. I couldn't get a job anywhere.
Oh,
I
my God.
wanted to work. That's all I wanted to do. I ended up going out to Easton and the Phillipsburg area to get a job, which was quite far from my home. And a very great company called the Manhattan Club hired me there. And I worked there for about 3 years.
Why would they blackball you?
I think they just wanted to be rid of me. They didn't want me in the area. They didn't want me
when
around.
you're such a bad person, I'm meeting you today for the first time, and I don't see how you could be a terribly bad person, but you wonder why a company would ever allow that to happen. And folks, it's in this book. I mean,
Yes.
it's actually pitiful. It really is, okay? And whatever they got, they deserved. Believe me when I tell you, that's my personal opinion.
Well, thank
no
you.
matter who it was.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, you just don't do that. I don't know how a person could be that bad that they even prevent you from getting a job to provide. I mean, how terrible can you be? Okay?
Yes.
Well,
Well,
don't
how
you get-
threatening. I mean,
Yeah, like
who
what are you
am
gonna-
I?
yeah,
you know?
What are you going to do? I mean, to shut them
Yes.
down? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No, it's okay.
So what happens?
So we finally got them into court, and the day of that the trial started, the attorneys go back, which I had no idea. So this is federal court. They go back with the judge, Judge Kane, and she lays out the rules. You can't do this, you can't do that. And my counselor, Pat Riley, he said, right as the end, opposing counsel said, "Hey, do you want to settle this?" And he said, "Oh, no, I've been instructed by my client that once we go through these doors, we're going to trial." And that is exactly what I said to him, because I felt I had a story to tell. I felt that a group of a jury who were people just like me
Yeah.
would hear my story and know that I was wronged. And it wasn't about money or fame for me, ever.
Yeah.
It was about wanting to work. It was about getting a story out there to empower people to know that they don't stand alone.
See, and that's something that, thank God we have some people, but a lot of people don't have that substance anymore that we were born and raised with. All they want to see, how much could I get for doing nothing?
Yes.
And let's sue the person. And there's people that just, have no, I call them substance in life, but you were born and raised with that, even though you came from an abused family. What were some of the highlights in that trial that you wanted to get across?
Some of the highlights, first, Judge Kane said to me, she said, this was in her chamber, she said, why didn't you ever apply for Social Security disability? And I said, well, what kind of example would I be to my children to not work, to not be a functional human being in society? But through the trial, you could actually see the jury when I would speak with them, because I was first up, you know, to tell my story. And I never looked at opposing counsel or looked at my lawyer. I looked at the jury, because they are people just like me, and they would get it, you know, and they did get it. They would shake their head, and you know, you're instructed at the beginning, you're not allowed to, if you pass them in the hall, turn your head. You can't go in the elevator with them, you know, because then it would be a mistrial. And I get that as well.
Yeah.
But after the trial was over,
Okay, let's stay on track.
All right, go ahead.
So what were some of the key things that these people were shaking their heads? What were some of the things that you were telling them?
Some of the things, the first thing was when opposing counsel came in, they had someone in a wheelchair who also had MS. And she was, when I was working there, she was my liaison, let's say, in human resources to kind of protect me. But they brought her in as a representative of the company, who she wasn't a VP, she wasn't a director, she was an employee just like me. But they brought her in a wheelchair to show the jury that they are fair, you know, that they treat people with disabilities the same. And when they did that, my attorney said to me, this is so appalling that they would, you know, showcase her in this wheelchair. But when she got on trial, on the stand, she admitted that she in fact thought that my disability was affecting my work. But she privately, in her thoughts, she thought that. But she didn't want to say that because she was fearful. So she'd said that on the witness stand. And my attorney, who had his assistant with him, who was another lawyer, he bent over to me and he said, they just lost. You know, they just lost.
So in the trial, how long did it last? 1 week?
Almost a week, yes.
Okay. So how long did it take them to deliberate?
2 hours.
Wow. So it was foregone probably just to get everything together.
Yeah, well, they had to decide, and we asked them after, you know, why 2 hours? And they said, well, we had to decide an amount, because there was two parts to it, you know.
Now, you disclosed the amount in here?
No, we were not allowed.
Okay.
It took 2 years to get the settlement, and we actually negotiated it only because I just wanted to be done with it, you know. I wanted it to be over.
Well, the satisfaction sometimes is the fact that you tell this story. Okay, so I ask you a question before I interview anyone. I always say, when I'm done with my show, what is it that you want the viewers to get from the show? Folks, we come back, we'll tell you what Jane wants you to get from this particular book called The Witness, and how can it help you and in your life. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show. Remember, download our app, SSP TV. Search SSP TV, and you'll know what I mean when I tell you to download the app. There's a lot of people that watch the shows, and they want to know if they live in California or whatever, they can now watch the shows. My guest today, Jane Gagliardo. Sherry Blackman, her writer, wrote this book called The Witness. Jane was abused as a child and went to work, had a disability, and they fired her. Okay, and in this book explains a lot of things of, you know, what you can get out of it. But you can get this book at Amazon, callthewitness.com, Kindle, and it's a book I highly recommend you getting. Okay, Jane, my question to you was this: so my viewers from Pottsville up to Scranton, Lackawanna, what do you want them to get from this show today?
I'd love them to know that if they have a disability, or even if they don't stand alone. That the American with Disabilities Act is there for people with disabilities. But I want to empower people to stand up for themselves, or to stand up for anyone that they think is being mistreated or unfairly having things done to them.
Well, you certainly, you went through a lot, because it took you 6, 7, 8 years before, from start to finish.
Yes.
But you were determined because you didn't take that $10,000 that they offered you
That's
when
correct.
you left. Okay. What did the jury say? Did they say anything about the company or about how you were treated? Or
Yes, after the trial was done, it was a rainy afternoon. We went out to go to our cars, and the jury was actually out there waiting for us and hugged us, and because you can't have any contact with them, hugged and kissed us and said, we knew from the moment you started speaking that, telling your story, that you were wronged, that you were definitely wronged.
Wow. Did the company ever apologize?
The company never apologized, but since my trial, my attorney has had over 100 cases from that company for
that right?
discrimination. Yes.
Well, you would think they would learn a lesson.
You would think.
What about the person that fired you? What is she doing?
I think she was terminated about 2 years after everything was settled.
So it's an interesting story, but I got to tell you, when you come from a family that, unfortunately, your father was an abuser, okay? But to survive that, and your mother having this strong constitution that she has, okay?
Yes.
And thank God he had a religion. Thank God he
Yes.
had that.
Yes, he did.
Maybe, he would get something from that. It's in the fact that you have a pride in what you do. And that's, I think, sometimes, Jane, we're lacking in the country today because people sometimes the government tells you not to work and do this to live off everybody. And there's no
Yes.
substance, okay?
Right.
And I don't want to be political because it's just frustrating. They don't know what they're doing to people's lives by doing that.
Yes.
Wouldn't you agree?
I agree 100%, yes.
What lesson did your children learn from this?
I think my children learned that, to be strong and to be strong in your convictions without compromising your own values. I think they learned that from me.
Boy, that's good
And
medicine. Yeah.
just if I may say, a percentage of every book that's sold goes to MS for research.
Yeah. I could tell you
Yes.
what, I could see that because, the kind of person you are and the substance. And let me tell you, God bless you because you look like perfect.
Oh, thank
perfect
you.
health,
Thank you so much.
So whatever you're doing, bottle it and
Yes.
sell it.
Thank
You'll
you.
open your own
Thank you.
pharmaceutical.
I have great doctors that take care of me.
Well, that's fabulous.
Yes.
Jane Gagliardo, folks. The writer is Sherry Blackman, and the book is called Call to Witness. Interesting book. And remember, parts of the proceeds go to the disability.
Multiple sclerosis. Yes.
Lived an interesting life and as a story to tell. It's Call to Witness. Don't forget, buy it, Amazon, Kindle, or go to calltowitness.com. And folks, once again, Pottsville, Channel 190, every day. In the Mountaintop, Wilkes-Barre, Kingston area, Channel 92, Saturday and Sunday evenings from 7 to 11. And Lackawanna County, my good friends out there in Scranton, Clark Summit, Sunday and Saturday mornings from 8 to 11 o'clock, we have our programs. So don't forget, and our website is ssptv.com. Download the app, SSP TV. We'll see you next time.